Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted and honored once again to be your host for Choice, Your Creative Superpower. We're coming to you each week from Oakland, California, Thursday at 12 noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. We are here to explore how you can wield your superpower, the greatest good, and co-create a life experience that is most fulfilling. For those of you who are coming back, it's so good to see you here again. And for those of you who are here for the very first time, welcome. I'm really glad that you've tuned in. Hello, Wayne. Good to see you. I am a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, and I'm also a transformational coach. Both my ministry as a practitioner and my mission as a coach are to help people live their lives to the fullest. Today, we'll be looking at choice and responsibility in episode 63. I'm always interested in understanding the origins of words and to see how their initial meaning has changed over time. Well, responsibility is a perfect example of this. Initially, if you were to look at both the Latin and the Old French, it meant the ability to respond, responsibility. It was much later on that it took on the meaning of accountability or an obligation. I wanted to bring this up now because it's too easy to think of all responsibilities as being obligations. That's far from the truth. And it's actually a perspective that disguises or discounts the importance of that original meaning. And we'll get into that in a bit, but I want to start with the idea of responsibility referring being accountable for your actions, your decisions, and your obligations. If you feel responsible for your actions or your decisions, to whom are you responsible? To yourself, your significant other, your friends, your community, your state or country, your higher power? Any or all of these is possible depending on context, but the choices around them, they can differ significantly. For example, being responsible to your state or country, well, that might mean engaging in requirements to have a driver's license in order to drive legally, or a requirement to file taxes. From the perspective of choice, there's not a lot of room for choosing here. If you want to uphold the law, you need a valid license to drive. And you need to pay taxes on your earnings. Unless, you've got a really, really inventive accountant. No, I'm not going to entertain ignoring the law as a choice. Okay. Now, other than legal obligations. Responsibility becomes an outcome of our choices because we choose to be in certain situations or circumstances that require certain observances. For example, if I choose to parent a child, I have an inherent responsibility to care for that child in some way, shape, or form. If I choose to work for a medical facility, I have a responsibility to ensure that I protect my own health so as not to spread illness among patients. If I choose to join an organization, I am responsible for following their guidelines and upholding their mission or vision. If I choose to own a building, I'm responsible for its upkeep and ensuring its safety. Where this gets really compelling is when we look at being responsible to ourselves or to a higher power. Now, for me personally, I refer to my higher power as God or as loving spirit. Now, why would these be different from those other types of responsibilities? Because these are absolutely, positively the outcome of your choices. And they speak to your identity, your values, and your beliefs. You had to decide, you had to choose to build, to join, whatever it might be. Right? So if you are looking at what the responsibilities are for your joining or building or doing whatever it might be, what you're looking at are being responsible for your actions, being responsible for your choices. And if they do not reflect your sense of identity, if they do not reflect your values or your beliefs, you've got some work to do. Now, granted, there are definitely times that we have responsibilities that we'd rather not have. And they might have even been forced upon us in some way, shape, or form. But those are few and far between. Now, when we talk about being responsible to God, my belief is that God is indeed all there is. And that comes with the responsibility to see all people as equally deserving of love and well-being. Not just the folks I agree with or I feel a connection to. My values of authenticity and honesty mean I have chosen to ensure to the best of my abilities that my thoughts, words, and actions are in alignment. Do I always succeed? No. But I'm working on it. My personal ethics and morals provide boundaries for myself and boundaries for my interaction with others, because I have chosen to be ethical. I have chosen to be moral, again, to the best of my abilities. But I want to look at the other aspect of responsibility that I'd mentioned earlier, the idea of the ability to respond, the response ability. I particularly like this aspect of responsibility because it speaks directly to how I choose to live my life. And I should note that what we choose not to respond to can be as important as what we do choose to respond to. Now, what choices could we make that would affect our ability to respond? Well, let's start with last week's topic, technology. Basically, it comes down to what we choose to learn and adapt to. As I mentioned last week, my technical skills aren't bad, but they're not as good as I'd like them to be. So my ability to respond to a request, or let's say to produce another host's show here on the New Thought Media Network, well, that would have been absolutely just stuck, stymied, had I not chosen to dig deeper and work through my sticking points. And I'm still working on them. So I have chosen to be responsible for this particular task, which means I therefore have to choose to learn more. I have to choose to become more proficient. What about being a responsible homeowner? Personally, I've lived many more of my years in apartments, so I never really had a strong need to learn how to maintain a house. But now, I need to respond to issues that I swear they pop up out of nowhere, it seems. Well, this has led me to understand more about electrical systems, more about plumbing, minor repairs, etc. Although I have to say, most of what I have learned is when it's really important for me to call in a pro. Remember I said we choose what we want to respond to in some cases? Well, there's a perfect example. So my choice of how I would respond was help. Now, for example, like for me, unlike my son, while my ability to respond to minor problems is there, anything major goes to the pros. Now, my son, on the other hand, can literally build a one-story structure. He can put in the electrical work, he can do plumbing, you name it. Likewise, as a former professional chef, I can cook pretty much anything you ask. But baking, still something of a bit of a mystery to me. And I don't feel like I have quite the same ability to be as creative. My daughter, on the other hand, could get a request for pretty much any kind of baked goods. And out comes a delicious result. My response would often be to buy something rather than laboriously work on a recipe. As I said, we pick and choose which requests we want to respond to, and which we choose how we want to respond. Excuse me. And of course, each choice that we make relative to a responsibility leads to additional choices. Often it's in support of one's need to respond or the result of one's success in responding, or I suppose one's lack of success in responding. In other words, when we are faced with a responsibility we can't handle, we get to choose. Do we want to pursue learning and expanding our abilities? Do we want to pass on it or leave it to someone else? Remember, your no might leave an opening for someone else's yes. Something to think about. So, choosing to be responsible often means taking into account the consequences of our choices and being proactive, being prepared. My wife and I chose to live pretty much on the San Andreas fault line. Well, we didn't go out and look for a house and say, hey, is that on the San Andreas fault line? Because we'd really like that. It just happened to work out that way. But just as it would be for someone who's living in a flood zone or a hurricane zone, being able to respond to an earthquake has most certainly affected many of our choices. Just for example, for us, it led us to make our house earthquake resistant. We keep earthquake supplies readily available and always well stocked. We have an escape strategy. And of course, I have to ensure my sister in New York that not every earthquake that occurs in California is actually dangerous or even affects us. Another aspect of responsibility is that ever important question, why? Why do I choose responsibility in a given situation or for a specific person? Doing something out of guilt is not quite the same as choosing to take responsibility. So I want you to listen to what Alan Cohen said um, regarding this in his book, A Deep Breath of Life. Let me bring this up. So he said, guilt is debilitating, while responsibility is liberating. Guilt is shrouded with blame. Responsibility empowers us toward greater possibilities. I like those distinctions. Oh, hey. Hi, Fiona. Fiona is a magnificent practitioner. She's in Geneva. Good to have you here. Now, speaking of the importance of why, I want to show you this excerpt by Eric Butterworth. All right, this is from his book, Spiritual Economics. Now, he's speaking specifically about financial matters, but I believe that his words apply in many aspects of our lives. So let's take a look at this next one. Okay. So he says, the starting point in realizing prosperity is to accept responsibility for your own thoughts, thus taking charge of your life. You are not responsible for what is said in the Wall Street Journal or what comes out of Washington in the form of economic indicators, but you are very much responsible for what you think about these things. You cannot afford to let the so-called experts decide how you are going to think and feel. Very interesting take on the idea of responsibility. All right. Being responsible for our thoughts, taking charge of our life, being in charge of deciding how we're going to think and how we're going to feel. Okay. So I wanted to highlight that excerpt specifically because of the importance of how we choose to address the one person we have absolute sole responsibility for, oneself. Being responsible for and to oneself is a foundation of living a fulfilling life. Okay. Could not ask for a more important aspect of responsibility. Giving up responsibility is an important choice. And it's a valid choice. But it's one we do not want to make lightly. As Eric Butterworth notes, it's key to be aware of your own thoughts and feelings. Now, I'm definitely not saying that you should ignore so-called experts or even renowned vetted experts. No, what I am saying is that taking what they offer and then discerning whether or not that resonates with you is part of the process of choosing well. And we have an odd thing as human beings where we have a tendency to respond to and relate to things that are said by people that we trust or believe in, or people that we think are quote unquote good people. And we have a tendency to reject those things that we hear from people that we don't particularly care for and we don't feel that we're in alignment with. Right. So you have to be careful with that, because the reality of life is that just because there's someone that you know or like or trust or feel that they're a good person, it doesn't mean that every single thing they say is something that you can respond to, something that you can find to be true or helpful. Likewise, someone that you dislike, someone that you don't trust, someone who does not share your same values. Well, the reality of life is occasionally, at least, they are going to say things that you would want to respond to. They are going to uphold things that you could respond to. Okay. Personally, this is just me speaking about me. Okay. Anyone or anything that says they have the answer to everything, well, let's just say I'm going to be cautious, very cautious. Nevertheless, I will be open to exploring, but cautious. Sometimes, actually, not even sometimes, it's often, I encounter when I'm counseling people that while they may feel responsible for supporting others and helping them through their difficulties, they often don't extend the same responsibility to themselves. And then they find themselves to be stuck in this place of defeat or shame or guilt. In essence, they're not able to respond to their own needs. If you find yourself in this situation, I want you to look for an illustration like the one I'm going to put up next. Okay. So if that's the way you are, if you are so convinced that you need to take care of other people and you neglect to take care of yourself, print this out. Go find it on, or any variation of this. You've probably seen this if you've been on an airplane. Okay. And I do agree that this is the greatest metaphor of all time. Take care of yourself first, because your ability to take care of others is dependent upon your ability to take care of yourself. You cannot give enough to another person if you do not give to yourself. Plain and simple. So I actually have many of my clients print something like this out, and I have them put it in every room in the house until they can feel more confident with the importance of taking care of themselves. The responsibility for oneself extends to many choices that we make in life. Taking care of our wellness, whether we're talking about our physical or our emotional or our spiritual wellness. Avoiding unnecessary risks. Being open to learn and grow in all aspects of life. So these are all part of being responsible for oneself. This is being self-centered. Now, when I say self-centered, what I mean is being centered and grounded in oneself, in who and whose one is, in one's true self. Because that brings benefits not only for yourself, but for others as well. What about being responsible to God, loving spirit? I find it impossible to believe that loving spirit would create out of love, with love, and then expect some form of compensation or insist on some sort of obedience without which there would be unfortunate consequences. No, I believe that being responsible to loving spirit, to God, is about being open and inviting and allowing. It's not being an automaton, it's not being a puppet, but it's being present, being able to respond. And what are we being present to and responding to? To the grace, the wisdom, the strength, the sheer abundance of the qualities and capabilities we each have within us, within our divine self, and then bringing them forward into our daily lives. That's what I call being responsible. You've likely heard the phrase, be the change you wish to see in the world. Well, being responsible to God and to ourselves is not about obediently fulfilling some predefined destiny. No, it's about truly and fully being who and whose we are. Yes, we are human with all the frailties and limitations of this physical vessel, as well as divine, perfect, whole, and complete. Created not just from loving spirit, but in loving spirit. I don't remember what movie it was that I saw this in, but I remember that there was this scene where someone is being encouraged to pray. And they said, but I don't believe in God. And the person who had suggested it said, well, that's okay. God believes in you. I'm going to close with these words from the book, Your Soul's Assignment by Chris Michaels. And he says, you are dancing with the divine as a co-creative spiritual partner in life. It is your responsibility to keep your sight on the greatest good you can imagine. Do not let anything interfere with your view. Do not let any negative event pull you away from your intended result. No matter what happens or appears to happen, keep looking at what you want. Dancing with the divine. Couldn't ask for a better partner. Well, that'll do it for today, folks. If you'd like to explore choice and responsibility further, or if you would like to suggest a topic relating to choice, let me bring this up here. There we go. Okay, you can connect with me at this email address, zodimuro@gmail.com. And know that I'm available for practitioner sessions or coaching, discussion, prayer. Always here for you. So, no, without a doubt, anything that you say to me, anything that you share is always held in complete confidence. I want to thank you for spending this time with me this week. And as always, I suggest that you explore ntmedia.org. See what there is that we have to offer. Some examples for today. 1 p.m. Mountain Time, Finding the Joy in the Journey with the most delightful Reverend Gina Calvario Kripke. Our special guest today is Reverend Dr. David Alt. 2 p.m. Mountain Time, Ken Ludwig, wonderful practitioner, presents the Vibrant Living Hour. At 4 p.m., Reverend Brock Ford presents the Spiritual Toolkit. And if at all possible, folks, know that in addition to the time and the talent that it takes to do all that we do here on the New Thought Media Network, it also takes treasure. So if you can go to ntmedia.org/donate, help us make this a world that works for everyone. That would be so magnificent. Namaste to you. All right. So we have this, we have that. Take care of this. All right, folks. I will see you next week. And until then, by all means, choose well, choose wisely. Namaste.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zo Muro.